Good evening, morning to those joining us from different parts of the world. Welcome to our Medjack Webinar Series. These webinars are held once a month, and the main purpose of these webinars is to start a conversation around ICE, innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship, and a chance for you to share your personal journey around innovation and beyond. We use our book Medjack as that conversation starter. Medjack is AKU's first ever digital book that has been co-authored by a total of 14 co-authors. It's available on Amazon and for Pakistan on a platform known as Kobo. And we also have print versions of the book available. I'd now like to introduce the moderator for today's session, Dr. Asad Mia, Professor Asad Mia, Chairman of Emergency Department at AKU and Director of CCIT. Hi, Dr. Asad, good to have you here.
Thank you, Marine. Hi, everyone.
And now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's session, who is Mr. Salman Tariq, co-founder and CEO Davaam. Quick introduction, Salman is a sustainability enthusiast with over 12 years of experience in business development within the clean energy and circular economy sector. He has previously worked with K Electric and Aman Foundation with a particular focus on waste to energy. Founded Davaam in 2017 and has spearheaded implementation of various projects related to solar PV, sustainability marketplace, and materials recovery facilities, waste management. Currently, he's leading efforts to mainstream Davaam's in-house developed refill and dispensing stations in an effort to reduce single-use plastic. He is also a visiting faculty at the IBA Karachi. He holds an MPA in Energy and Environment from Columbia University. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a speaker for today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So, few ground rules, housekeeping rules. This is meant to be an interactive session. If people who are joining us online have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please feel free to either raise your hand or put them in the chat space provided, and we'll give you a chance to interact with our guest for today. Without further ado, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marine. So welcome, everyone. The chapter that we have used for starting the conversation with Salman today is chapter 4 of Medjack. There's a book, get a copy. There's a digital version available as well. There's an ebook. It's on Amazon. If you're in Pakistan, then you can get hold of the print copy. It's available here. And medjack.net is that website. So you can find about how to access the digital book or the print copy. So chapter 4, Salman, is about incubation and how to build an incubation ecosystem as part of an innovation ecosystem, perhaps, if I may. And what we talk about in that chapter is early stage incubation, more so from the perspective of a healthcare institution, an academic healthcare institution, particularly such as the Arkan University, because our main focus over here for several decades, I would say, has been healthcare, health focused. And so it's a no-brainer why we delved into health innovation and health incubation to learn about the innovation ecosystem. And that's what chapter 4 kind of gets into through, through a description of various iterations of the incubation programming of ours and what we learn from each program, if I may, and how we iterated upon it and how we improved, what were our challenges and opportunities, and so on and so forth. So we've had several challenges and we've had several many successes, I would say, and we're learning constantly, and it's a work in progress. And incubation is really one aspect of what we do. It's not the end all be all. We're not entirely an accelerator. We'll be far from that by design, not by default. We'll get into this as the conversation evolves. So my first question to you, Salman, is that keeping that incubation journey in mind, and that's a chapter to start our conversation. Tell us how do you see incubation in the kind of sector that you're working in. Recycling is part of that, is at least that's my basic understanding, and you can expand on that. So it says over here, particular focus on waste to energy, and that is very interesting to me. So waste to energy, and if that's part of a recycling paradigm, perhaps it is, perhaps it's not. But how do you see business incubation using that as a starting point? And then maybe you can, and then we can
Sure.
have follow-up
No,
questions.
thank you for having me. And such an interesting thing. This is also my second or third engagement at AKU in a very short, span of time, and which tells me that there's a lot of activity going on, which is very exciting. I didn't even know about that this was happening. So congratulations to you and your center. It's very important, business incubation in the startup world, waste to energy, waste management, sustainability. This is my journey, which has kind of evolved. And I think any entrepreneur or startup that you talk about, you start at one point, and point is you always evolve and pivot. Point is pivoting. That's why in my in my introduction, you would hear things like waste to energy and solar PV and recycling and plastic waste, because this is my entire journey. And business incubation, when you talk about, it's very important because any incubator is very important for early stage startups. I went through my own journey on my own. So, but if I look back, if I look back as my journey as an entrepreneur, the one thing that helped me was my first 6 years of, say, work experience. I was an entrepreneur from the beginning. I used to work somewhere, and I was very lucky enough to work with the bosses and the mentors that I had. Wherever I went, I kind of worked with the CEOs, and my unofficial term was the shadow to the CEO. And I was always the youngest person in the room, taking minutes, going, I was a errand boy running around from the minutes to actually reading commercial contracts, had to wrap my head around that. So for me, that was my incubation as an all-rounder into startup journey, right? Even though before my startup journey began, but if in the last 5 years, what I've learned, what helped me navigate through this journey was the fact that this incubation happened. So when I now look at the importance of incubators, it's so important for early stage entrepreneurs, because any person who's interested in health or some IT guy will think about a technical solution, but it's so important for them to also be an all-rounder in the management side of things. Running a business and entrepreneur is not just about whatever technical solution you think about, it's also running a company and administration, right? How do you register a business? How do you pay your taxes? Are you a good leader? How do you talk to people? And how do you talk to your subordinates? And it's more admin than the other side, the technical side of things that people just talk about. That's why incubation is so important, to provide that early support. It's an advisory, it's mentorship, it's capacity building, it's having access to mentors and maybe operational facilities. And I think early stage, uh, when you're present at a university especially, and these early ideas are students, they need that at that point in time. So the importance cannot be stressed more.
Thank you. So that was a great uh, getting a feedback into this discussion and to this chat. So tell us a bit more about Davaam. What is Davaam and what's it about?
So for Davaam, what it means is, it's an Urdu word. Davaam means to continue, to persevere, never ending, everlasting, infinite. And you can see the tie-in with sustainability, right? And it's not an Urdu word, it's also used very commonly in Turkish. And recently I went to Azerbaijan and people understood this term. So it was a very regional. And you go into the history of Urdu and how Urdu is like an amalgamation. So I always wanted, when I was naming a company, which is so important, people just randomly name whatever comes to their head, but it was important to name a company that captures the ethos of what the business is all about. So, and I'm no literature person. I went to translate.google.com and all I did was write synonyms of clean, green, environment, sustainability. And I was trying to convert them into Persian, Turkish, and I came across this word Davaam, which is actually quite a beautiful word, which in some connotations means perseverance. That actually that actually really tells you a lot about a journey of an entrepreneur that you have to persevere through. So Davaam means sustainability, and last 5 years it was really a journey of how do we get sustainable businesses. My first thing that we did was installing solar on rooftops. That's how it started, right? We tried to sell energy efficient equipment, because the idea of energy and installing solar is everybody wants to save money, right? That's the entire point. Nobody is married to the concept of solar, being passionate. People want to save money. That's the end point. So solar is one way to save energy. The other is we don't even know that we waste more energy in old inefficient appliances like ceiling fans and lights. So that's part of the entire menu of services. So for a while we did that we went out there to large industries and campuses, and we advised them on how they could reduce their bills through solar, through energy efficiency. When we were doing that, we found out that so many people are making gas saving devices and energy saving devices and window films that save a lot of energy. Suddenly I became a walking talking marketplace. So I said this should be on a website somewhere where somebody wants to buy an energy efficient thing, they should actually have access to this. So I became a e-commerce website then. So dvm.com.pk was the first energy and environment saving website, and that opened up to more organic. uh, Somebody was making biodegradable sanitary pads, I put that. Somebody was making electric vehicles, so I said I want to make a one-stop shop. When I did that, we realized these things don't sell themselves in Pakistan, so they should be a shop. So then I invested in an actual shop, so we went into retail. Bad luck for us, we spent a lot of money for 8 months in kind of making an Apple shop, kind of a workshop. 23rd March 2020 we had to inaugurate it. 17 March 2020 was the first lockdown. August economy opens up. We're obviously bankrupt at that point in time. We said let's start, and then the rains of 2020 happened, and the worst place affected was Khayawane, Bukhari, and DHA, because there is no like sewerage point over there, and I couldn't even visit my shop for 7 days to see what the impact had happened. So we tried to do that. With all of this happening, because I'm crazy and so is my co-founders equally, Umar, because we're crazy about waste and all of those things, we said we also should do waste management. So we hired a car. Our car used to go in DHA. We started collecting waste from 23 kg a day. We went up to 300 kgs a day. We brought them into our site. We segregated, separated, made compost out of our organic. We were repurposing 70% of the waste. At one point in time, we were operating a shop and we were operating our waste. And in our waste side, I kept seeing these shampoo bottles and plastic bottles, and we thought this is such a waste. We could actually reuse them. And hence the pivot to what I'm doing right now. This everything is connected, right? So my engineers, because they were sitting without jobs because of COVID, nobody was installing solar because that was not a work from home thing. So our engineer said, let us try and build this machine ourselves. So 2 years down the line, now we've built this technology which reduces waste at source. And the idea is if you buy a shampoo in a bottle, retain your bottle, go to our machine and refill it, because more than 50% of the product price we pay is just the packaging. Now we could do this for shampoo, soap, cooking oil, liquids, dispensers, lubricants. It's an entire new market. So reducing waste at source rather than post-consumption waste management. Now I ended everything else that we were doing, and now we're making refill station. The idea is 5 years ago when I came back from my master's with 5 years, 6 years of power sector journey behind me, I was in the domain of NEPRA and power and solar and wind and tariffs. Now I'm thinking about viscosity of products, right? How much viscous shampoo is. It's an entire journey that led me here. So point is, you can always start. It's not going to be perfect, but your journey will define you. And in this entire 5 years, you have to really persevere, right? And operating entrepreneurship itself is hard. Imagine entrepreneurship in environment. That was like double hard. And in the middle came COVID. That was triple hard. So here we are at some point of our evolution, and finally I think every idea has the right time, because I heard somebody say that all your stars can align, but even then you need that luck, right? So for the last 3 years we were running after people talking about sustainability, and people said we are in Pakistan, people don't care about sustainability, money, blah blah blah. Suddenly the winds have changed, unfortunately. Now everybody's talking about sustainability, climate change. It's not a fad, it's not a fashion, it's not going anywhere. So there is suddenly demand for businesses and solutions like us. So the people and companies that we were running after the last 3 years now have been calling us every day for the last 2 years. So all of this was worth it. And we believe that this is our time. We made a machine. Finally, last year, we won this amazing funding opportunity from Karandas. Have to mention them. Just last week, we won the Shell Tamir Awards.
Wow.
So we are being recognized. We have gotten few large, big clients. We're speaking to AKU. Fingers crossed, because there's so much floor cleaner and shampoo that you purchase. Imagine the plastic that comes in behind closed doors. So what we're saying to them, get these products from us. It'll save not only plastic, it's going to save you money. And what we've realized is, if you're an ecopreneur, sure, environment is good, but environment doesn't sell. There has to be a business model behind this. So now an environment is a plus thing that we say. The first thing that we talk about is there's money savings. And I always quote this example of solar. Karachi has now, finally, there's solar on many rooftops, you see, right? It's not that everybody's become an environmentalist overnight. People are not putting up solar, spending 2 million, 3 million on solar because they're environmentalists. They're doing it because there's money savings and cost savings.
Right. Wow.
That's too much information in a short period of time.
No, that was a very impassioned or passionate journey account as well. And hats off to you, because you've Davaam'd through it.
Yes.
Right. So I love the name, actually. I did not know it meant perseverance, and it's in Persian as well. And lovely word. And the way you describe it, there's a story behind it, and and you've been able to capture our imagination, or my imagination as well, through your storytelling, and that's part of this process that we are doing through webinars, through this Medjack webinars, to hear your story and see, and this is kind of a reflection for us, like a mirror, right? So how do we see ourselves in there, or vice versa? So, which brings me to the point that you mentioned, that AKU, that you've been working with AKU as well, right? So, and we're AKU, by the way. At times, like we're those disruptors, and okay, we're the French elements, we're the crazy lot. So we agree with you. We're also crazy and weird.
Yeah.
So yeah, you want to say something? Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, look, I know you are AKU, but when you're taking an idea which is new, right, which disrupts a lot of status quo, we expect that not everybody will welcome us with open arms, and that's where perseverance comes in. And for large organizations like AKU, or large campuses, and which there's a bureaucracy exists over there, for me, my sales mission is to find champions within these organizations and convince them, because I feel right now you're convinced, and I believe you will be that champion. And then there will be some people in every organization who are resistant to change. You are telling them to change your old ways and adapt something new, because they may be cost saving, sure, environment, and blah blah blah. But that's my job right now. I know that I'm going to speak to you, I'm going to speak to 15 other people in AKU. There will be one person that will understand this and will then be my ambassador in that campus.
I was hoping that you would be that for us, but yeah, like you can flipping the. Yeah, I hear you. So with the president's challenge, which is with the theme of waste nothing and climate solutions and whatnot, and you were part of the jury for the hackathon we did, I think a few weeks back. Yeah, and so. What did you think of that? Do you think, and I'll kind of make the question a bit more politically charged, if I may. Okay, so do you think that, you mentioned that, the organization or the individual might not be all that gung-ho about environment change for environment change. It's really, where are you able to save money? And that becomes your driving force versus the environment itself. So you might be using that as a proxy, but do you feel that we're also just simply getting onto the bandwagon because everybody else is, and so we also have to do this? Or do you feel that there's something more to it, based on the startup pitches that you heard. And remember that these are a bunch of medical students and nursing
Yeah,
students for the most part, and they're busy in their clinical studies and all that. So how would
Sure.
you put that in
No,
perspective?
absolutely. And it was a great sight to and participation to be the other day. Solutions, what they were pitching right now for me doesn't matter. But the fact that they were thinking about solutions and thinking about the process at such an early stage. I mean, I've had to graduate just by pure luck. I was in an organization that probably gave me that opportunity to work on a waste to energy project, and my interaction with waste and gobar and cow dung happened, and love at first sight happened out of nowhere. It is what it is.
It was bullshit.
Yeah, it was bullshit.
Essentially.
I was like knee deep in BS. I know the physical and the metaphorical. I
Yeah,
can smell it from the my.
Spiritual.
So that's my entire thing. But the fact that university students are now being forced to think about solutions, and they have to. It's their future. I mean, the reason why sustainable and eco environment friendly was being taken lightly by our previous generations, because we kept framing the problem, this is the problem for the future and our future generations. It's not about future generations. We're talking about 2030. This is about this. It's an existential crisis. So there is no other option than to actually think about this. So for me, the other day, the ideas and the maturity does not matter, but the fact that they were thinking about it. And I just told you my journey. I started from one end and I'm doing something else because I was so passionate about, at least whatever I do, it has to be there has to be an environmental impact at the core. As long as that your core mission stays true, you would be able to find one solution or the other that fits in the market. If not today, but maybe in the 5 years down the line, some environment will change and it will become that. So from that perspective, it was a great thing to kind of engage with that. And the fact that your health sector does not stop you from encouraging students to be there. And I keep telling everyone, and I think spoke the other day as well, that you can continue to be education sector, you can continue to be health or telecom or IT, everybody's environment. So it cannot be, look, I'm a doctor, so I'm into this and saving lives, you're amazing superhuman beings, sure. But at some point you will go to a stage where you're probably opening up your hospital and you got to think about how that's going to be sustainable in an environment that produces a lot of waste, that needs a lot of energy. So you have to incorporate that renewables and sustainability thing. So as a start, it's good. It's yet too early to say if this is just greenwashing or actually true, as you put in. Outputs are important, but it's important that you have an access. Students have an access to go somewhere with their ideas to take them to, and then through your department, it's possible for them to do so.
Yeah, good. Excellent points, right? So we do encourage the teams, and if somebody's listening, if they were to come back and talk to us about what they want to do with those ideas and take them ahead, so can be happy to guide them further. So you have got into reducing and recycling plastic waste, right? Is that like as a startup, or is it part of this entity, Davaam? Tell us more about that. How is that linked, or how is that different?
I mean, it is Davaam now. So we were doing a lot of things, as I mentioned. We tried, failed. I'll say that as a positive thing. Failure for an entrepreneurship is so important.
Right.
And so I would say that the biggest achievement I did in the last 5 years, I successfully failed continuously. And I'm still here telling my story. Doesn't mean I'm like, I'm whatever your definition of success would be, but I'm still sitting here, breathing and fighting another day. So Davaam has now, through other sustainable businesses, has come to me in our existing business, which is this idea of refill stations. And our idea is that there's a whole value chain where, when it comes to, first of all, climate change and this sustainability is such vague terms. There's such overarching terms we don't even know or comprehend what they're about. And sometimes when you think about the climate crisis, when we start thinking about it, we get overwhelmed and it feels that it's not in our control, as an individual, as a society, as a country. So the first thing that people should do is break that problem down into small, manageable chunks, right? So everything has an environmental impact. the power sector, the buildings, the retail, the consumption, agriculture. There are whole sectors over here. And every sector has the entire value chain: production, distribution, consumption, post-consumption. When you make this grid, this basically grid starts appearing. And every small block needs to have multiple solutions within them. We sit in the circularity chain, what you call circular economy, where we're trying to reduce waste. Now, everybody talks about waste management from the perspective of waste that is produced. A waste produced ho gaya, so what should we do? Should we make bricks out of this? Should we make compost out of this? Who's going to collect this? Etc. etc. And those are valid solutions. We are now at the very start of the solution. Waste management does not start when somebody throws something in the dustbin. It starts when you walk into a retail outlet and decide that today I'm going to buy milk in Tetra Pak or plastic. That's the start of waste management, right? So if you reduce plastic at source, one bottle, behind that bottle, there are upstream processes of manufacturing that bottle, carbon emissions, water emissions. Then bottle comes to the store, you use it. On average, plastic is used 12 minutes. Maybe HDPE shampoos use 15 days. You discard it. Then there's entire collection process of collecting, transporting, segregating. And if you are able to recollect it, then the entire recycling process, or it goes to land. The fact that you can say no to that bottle, you obviate this process and you obviate this process. So we said we're going to reduce waste at the upstream stage. But at this point, consumers don't have any other option. You go to the retail outlet, you're just provided single-use plastics. And do you know that most of these shampoos and bottles you buy, more than 50% of the price is just the packaging? The product is less valuable than the packaging. And that is my business model. If I can convince the companies to ship their product in bulk, put it in my machine, and maybe place this in a hostel somewhere who want soap every day. Okay, forget about shampoo. For people are very, we can do shampoo as well. We can do cooking oil, but see, soap, people don't care if this is X brand or Y brand or Z brand, as long as it's available near to them at a discounted price, conveniently located. Would people refill or not? It's a debate. Some people might say, Pakistan people won't do this, but I beg to differ. I believe that if you provide this conveniently, that's the starting point. So for us, the starting point is going to large businesses, hence large banks that have huge facilities management requirement. Place our machines there. Place our machines in housing societies, in hostels where young people actually sit there. And for the Gen Zs, right, technology adaptation is, they don't come with the baggage that some of our generation, our previous generation.
Right.
The problem is the people who have money and investors, they're from a previous generation. So they sit across me and say, this is not going to work. They have the money and they are out of touch.
Right.
They don't see what the other generation and what's important to them. So it's my challenge is technology, my challenge is business, my challenge is mindset behavior. And that's where I'm fighting right now. And it's a big battle. And it takes a lot of there's operation problems, there's sales business problems right now. And once inshallah I have 50 100 machines out there as a network of machines, I'll have operational problems, right, once my machines are out there.
True.
So I've come to a point where this idea was on a paper, it was piloted, the version 1 was made, problems identified, version 2, version 3, version 4. Now it's in a lab somewhere where Unilever just got it from us, and that's a big thing for us. We actually implemented this on ground with another Lahore-based company on organic products. People brought back their package, so it works. We've gone to the point where we've done a survey with Gallup Pakistan. People want this. It's just about how do we crack this? It's a chicken and egg problem. We come to organizations like large campuses and they say, what brands do you have on board? We go to brands and they say, what locations do you have? And how much product are you going to move? So it's a chicken and egg problem that you just need to crack. And once it cracks, I believe that's a good financially sustainable model and a financially rewarding model as well. And that's very important.
Nice. Tell us a bit more. So when you talk about soap, I'm assuming because you're saying refilling, so it's liquid soap, right? Hand soap.
Yeah. So it's liquid. And once you do liquid, you can use soaps and shampoos. We're talking to cooking oil companies. We've given a proposal to a large fuel company that sells lubricants in plastic. Whenever you go for an oil change, they sell you this in plastic. There's always a small leftover. Put that in the trunk of your car, you never use it again.
Right.
That bottle, because I've been an ex-kabadia and in post-consumption, I know that bottle sells for the highest amount in the secondary market. Why? Because counterfeit products are put in and sold.
Oh.
So it's a huge pain point for a company.
Right.
Third thing, my machines, which are tech-enabled, now come with Wi-Fi and analytics. So I know which machines had what stock, how much sales are happening. Right now, somebody has to give in 200 bottles of shampoo in a Kiryana store. They have to visit the next day and ask, so how many of those 200 bottles are sold? Do we need restocking? My machines kind of solve that with technology. So it's an entire distribution and supply chain I'm solving, which at the end of the day is also environmentally friendly and saves plastic. That's and it's a huge industry. Sky is the limit. We also made one sanitary pads dispensing machine, just because whenever you talk about environment, you always talk about social, ESG, and access to critical products like sanitary pads become important. So one of the machines that we made can dispense single pads, and imagine those are placed in washrooms where you critically require at a point in time, so they should be available. So those are made. We can even do any product vending as well, but any products we can handle as far as refilling is concerned. We're also making one for powders. We're testing it right now. So imagine the washing powders, and once we do that, then there's the milk-based powders. We're making one for milk, though that's tricky because that requires chilling and cooling. But point is, sky is the limit.
Right.
If maybe 5 years down the line, my shop idea was too early, but I'm going to have a shop again, which is just a refill shop where you get everything in refilling, and you save 20-30% of your cost in groceries.
Right. Excellent. So wishing you all the luck for that, all the best, and keep us posted. And I will be one of the first ones to actually utilize a recycle, whatever store, Davaam.
Yes.
Right. So, मुझे बताओ कि, and I'm sure that you've done this kind of research as well, कि hospital ka footprint kya hota hai, carbon footprint or whatever, like in terms of impacting the environment.
So, hospitals and health institutes, I know this because one of my projects was on kind of advising on a renewable thing for a hospital. I know 2.5 times they're more energy intensive than any commercial building, because there's so much of power requirements. Critical appliances need powering all the time, right? So the energy footprint is twice. Generally, most of the commercial organizations or large campuses have 2 or 3 things as their emissions footprint. One is the energy, and energy is not powers. I mean, power being the main thing, but it's also fuel that you use. Maybe you have a few boilers and heating systems. So energy is the first one. Secondly, obviously, there's a huge waste footprint as well. There is hospital waste, and hospital waste cannot be dealt like municipal solid waste. It has to be incinerated rather than disposed of in sewers and other things. Then there's the other municipal solid waste and plastic waste, because you use a lot of product. Mobility, not as such, because you don't use as much shuttles, but if you have a transport-based systems or you also own ambulances, then that fuel that goes into over there is also part of your entire supply chain. And when you talk about how do you reduce your footprints, those 3 are the things where you can actually make those interventions. In energy, the lowest hanging fruit right now is solar. Easiest thing that you can do, solarize your rooftop as much as you got and reduce that footprint. You can now, based on the power sector, you can also, if your requirement is more and your roof has less space, you can actually invest in other power plants and have them wheeled to your facility, or at least you can offset those emissions by saying we've made investments in a solar power plant over here, so that they kind of count towards your emissions and you can offset whatever emissions you have. Wastewater treatment, then you could do energy efficiency. Mostly, I mean, your lighting is now very latest LEDs, but other cooling requirements you can probably do. If you've got any sun-facing windows, you can put those heat trapping sheets that reduces your cooling load as well, and that converts into your emissions and also your footprint. And then obviously waste management things as well. So these are largely what you can do. But the first thing what any organization should do is, rather than doing this in ad hoc ways, first measure how much emissions you have. And this is called scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. And for most organizations, this is voluntary right now, where you do greenhouse gas emission accounting. First, it's important for you to measure. And once you have that, then you make a strategy document in the next 5-10 years, or by 2030, if we need to reach our goals, which need to be like zero emissions, these are the steps that needs to be done. This is the financing required. And how are you going to gain that financing? There's enough available out there. The biggest problem right now in climate is that financing is not made available for developing countries like Pakistan. And that's the biggest thing happening right now in COP27. But even if the financing is available, we don't have enough projects to kind of access those financing, and that financing is going to other countries. You have to make those projects where you say, we're going to convert our campus to zero emission campus by 2030. This is what we got to do in solar. This is what we're going to do in electric vehicles. This is what we're going to do in energy efficiency or waste.
So you mentioned, so do we have any questions or comments? People online or over here, please feel free to interrupt me. And then if you would like to ask Salman a question, feel free. You could put it in the chat box as well. This is meant to be a very interactive session.
Sure.
But I'm really enjoying this conversation. Tell me, you mentioned COP27. I've come across COP27. What is COP27?
So it's Conference of Parties. It was started by the UNFCCC as an kind of coordinate. It was a thing where countries get together every year and coordinate on climate activities, right? And there are multiple other things that UN under the UN's umbrella they've done, where there is IPCC, where the world scientists go out there and look at climate-based evidence and scientific evidence and their support. And so this is a way for countries to kind of coordinate on climate activities, and happens every year. And since the 1990s, there are a few COPs that have become way more famous, in the sense they were milestone agreements, like the Kyoto Protocol happened for the first time, the carbon. And the latest one was 2015, the Paris Climate Agreement. It was just a COP in Paris where the 192 countries for the first time said that we need to restrict emissions by 1.5 degrees. And every year COPs happen. So today, at this time around, it's happening in Egypt. And the entire conversation is now around financing, because the developed countries committed that there'll be $100 billion of annual financing that will go towards financing projects in developing countries, in the most vulnerable countries. For Pakistan right now, because we're just recovering, not even recovered from the floods, the conversation is there has to be a loss and assessment, a damage financing for Pakistan. It should come from other countries, because we're less than 1% of the global emissions. And next year, this is happening in UAE. So it happens every year. Some years it becomes way more famous, so it's known as the 2015 Paris Agreement or something. But it happens every year, where countries review progress and they make commitments towards this goal.
Nice. Just following up on that, right? So you mentioned that high-income countries are supposed to put together some money, and give that to low-income countries or low-middle-income countries to I guess to fix the damage because of climate change or environmental damage and so on. So is there evidence that the global north is doing more damage to the environment or to the earth, and we are suffering more because of things that are happening in the global north?
Yes, so the IPCC reports I mentioned confirm first that humans are responsible for this. And our burning of the fossil fuels is responsible for this. And now we can track who burns more fossil fuels. Right? So the developed countries, like there's a big debate about coal, right? And I was teaching my class as well, and it's a debate, right? While the world has developed and made their progress on the back of cheap coal and indigenous coal, and now when it's our time, when we find our own reserves, now the world is moving away. Right? So it's a dilemma for us that for us, when we talk about energy security, we're vulnerable because most of our energy resources are imported. The one indigenous thing that we had was gas, and that's finished. So the one left over is coal. And when we import, when we say, okay, we're not going to use coal, we don't have gas anymore, we still need to import oil and then gas and other resources, that makes us vulnerable. When the rupee depreciate, the energy prices also are linked to it. So now when we found our indigenous coal, the world is moving away. So one of the argument over here is that, you know, we're just less than 1% of the emissions. They have done their entire development, they have run out of coal now. So we should actually keep doing coal. But one of the other arguments is, you know, we can't harm our own environment right now sitting here. And there's a lot of contamination going on. So we have to look towards renewables with whatever constraints renewables has towards that. So if we are not going to use our coal, and if we have to go towards renewables and battery solutions, which are still a bit expensive, then the developed countries need to help us, because they've made their entire GDP growth and their incomes all of that. And when it comes to climate, just for your knowledge as well, there are two things, there are two large boxes. One is climate mitigation and one is adaptation. Adaptation means that, you know, some things that, well, if there is a area that floods every year, then adaptation means that we resettle some of those populations. We learn to live with climate change. That's adaptation. Climate mitigation is the emissions that we're burning every day through our cars and energy, our status quo of life. We start changing that towards less emissions, and there comes solutions like changing from fossil fuels to solar, changing from internal combustion engine cars to electric vehicles. That changes the way we live our life, basically. Those are mitigation services.
Thanks. Interesting. Do we have questions, comments, or we do have people online? So, people, go ahead.
There's one thing in the chat, though. I think I see a red.
That's a comment or a.
Okay.
Let's take a look.
Yeah, that's us.
Okay, that's us. Salman, tell me about your Mohem, which is your. I don't know if it's a battle, or I wouldn't want to call it a battle, but you're like a person who's fighting for the environment and passionately doing so. Do you also get interested in doing something directly linked to animals and plants as well, or this is the scope is here is what you've described, recycling and all of that?
I mean, the scope is huge when it comes to, as I said, in adaptation, there's environment, there's the natural habitats, and there's other species that you can do, but you have to limit yourself, right? So I describe a whole bunch of things. Maybe at one point we were doing too many things at the same time, so it wasn't a good strategy. So now we're focused, and this is in itself is a huge, again, kind of battle for one company to kind of fight over. So right now we're focused on that. But as a person in this field, I'm happy to support or help in those areas. But it's important that, again, whatever we do, there has to be a business model around it. There are some solutions within the climate solutions which need to be supported by the government or tax funds or grants. Natural habitats probably are one of those. So those are more grant-based models. I want to make a more financially sustainable model. That's what I'm focused, where there is a business case. And at the end of the day, there is also environmental impact. So that's my limit right now. But, you know, as a person, I always believe that somebody who works in the climate, there has to be two or three things that everybody should be doing. I try to do all three. One is climate action. So my entrepreneurship is my climate action, which is I put my own money. I'm putting money where my mouth is. I've burnt my own money and I'm struggling every day. I'm a foot soldier there, right? The second thing is climate knowledge. If you can't do that, at least work towards building that knowledge. So I'm a consultant with a couple of large multilateral agency as a climate finance consultant. I've been doing consultancies. I'm doing one for UNDP right now on SDG 7. I've done in the past. And one is advocacy or preparing the future or working with students. So I teach at IBA, that's my thing. And I introduced a course called Energy System and Policy that did not exist, specifically for the reason when we talk about energy and environment, people think engineering, right? People assume that I've worked for 10, 12 years in power sector, I must be an engineer. And that's not the case, because it's such an interdisciplinary subject. So I wanted to introduce this. I took this course to Habib University first in their social, and now I'm teaching this to the economic students. So I'm doing all three. If you can't do any one of them, do advocacy at least. At least support startups who are working there, because we need them, or raise your voice. I mean, that's one thing that you could do. For me, doing all three was important.
So the three things you mentioned were climate action, climate knowledge,
And
climate
advocacy.
teaching?
Advocacy.
Gotcha.
We
Okay.
do have questions in the chat
let's
space
go.
provided. All right, let me read them. So Noor is saying, although I understand the need for interventions for climate change and environmental damage, being a public health research and a whole section dedicated for environmental health, but what really interests me is thinking and mindset of an entrepreneur. Okay, that's more of a comment. So there is a question. So Naveen's asking, what do you know about Pakistan? How does Pakistan work for the topic? Where do you think it acts superiorly than other countries in working upon solutions, and where it lacks or there's work to be done?
Wow, there's so many. It's a big. I mean, there's so many ifs and buts. Sure, I'll just say one thing. Everybody finds faults with Pakistan, so let me. You'll find them dime a dozen. When it comes to sustainability, we're too. अभी हम कहाँ, अभी तो 10 साल लगेंगे, अभी तो पहले ये अमेरिका में भी नहीं हुआ. So I'll just in terms of what I do in plastics, right? Imagine when I was building an I keep hearing this every day, that this is, why would people bring back their packaging? Why would people refill? We won't do this. We're not America. We're not Europe. And sometimes we also underrate our qualities. If I talk about reusability and sustainability, Pakistan is the real champion of that. We don't realize it, right? Every one of us in our household has a Danish cookies box, जिसमें धागे और sewing का equipment है. Every one of us has 5 to 6 different ice cream boxes in our refrigerators, which none of them have ice cream. They have dal and they have other things, and we give it to our neighbors, right? Every one of us in our households has a bag full of other plastic bags, right? The world, we used to call it conjuicy or frugality. Now the world calls it sustainability. We are the real champions of reusing things. We don't throw away anything. हम गाड़ी बेचने जाते हैं तब जाके वो प्लास्टिक उतारते हैं, कवर हैं, चेयर बेचने जाते हैं. So actually, we are the real champions, and if we actually incentivize and channelize it, we are doing it. And some of us are from socio-economic classes where we actually don't know what the real Pakistan is all about. You go to Empress Market, people are already refilling things, right? They're very price conscious. It's just a few higher, socio-economic classes that, when it comes to plastic waste, no Gharib uses or buys pani in a plastic bottle. We do it, right? They don't buy, again, in plastics. When you go towards the lower income sections of society, for them, organic waste is 80%. When you start coming up to higher income households, the dry waste and the non-organic is more. So point is, there are goods and bads to every society. For us, it's an existential crisis. I'll tell you, solar, everybody thinks now solar is mainstream. Solar was mainstream 5 years ago. You know, the first places that adopted solar were interior Sindh and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, because they didn't have any bijli. For them, they didn't have any option. They didn't have a grid. So they were all these people will be the first ones to adopt these climate solutions, because it solves the problem. We in our head think that climate solutions are just first world solutions. They cost a lot of money and they're luxurious things. No, they save money. They are essential for our survival, and they solve a lot of problems. So yeah, in Pakistan, when it comes to solving problems, we have a lot of problems.
All right. There's another question from Khalid Hamid. Would you like me to read it out? Or okay. So I'll just read it out. Thank you for sharing your wonderful journey with us, Salman. What were practical challenges that you faced while implementing your business plan in Pakistan, and how did you overcome those? Maybe sharing a few examples.
Practical challenges, it starts from, I mean, every step has a challenge. Starts from nobody's willing to give you money. So you have to burn your own, and yeah, you have to side hustle to kind of make a living. Unless you come from a very wealthy background or something. I'm not from a millionaire or billionaire family. I didn't even want to do entrepreneurship in the first place. I was actually looking for jobs after my master's. In August, I was interviewing. September, I had my company incorporated. So it just happened. Um, so again, when I started, there wasn't any guidance. There wasn't a startup ecosystem. The good thing right now is there is an ecosystem you keep hearing about now. Disrupt is happening, and other incubators are here, and every large campus now has an incubator and the right people for advice. So I didn't have that. It was mostly a, a learning by doing journey. So that was a challenge. Biggest challenge for me, in the space I operate, is obviously mindsets. I spoke about that nobody is really interested in environment. I learned it the hard way that with all the talk going on these days, and panel sessions and Zoom sessions on clean and green, behind closed doors, everybody asks, how do we save money? And we're not going to spend anything. So I learned it the hard way that business model has to be at the core of anything that you do. Anything extra has to be around it. So if you think you have a nice story and a nice video of environment and social, and people will be like crying and then suddenly give all of their money to you, that's not going to happen. And you have to make a business case around it. um, so, and when you don't have money to operate, I mean, there's so many other problems, right? The people who are working with you and the kind of quality people, I wish I could afford uh, the right people and poach other people from other organizations, but I have to always work with fresh grads. And when you're working with fresh grads, you have to train them, and then very hard to retain them because you don't have the money to kind of retain them. And then once you train them, they move on. And so those are practical challenges of a startup that bootstraps, kind of puts your own money in them. On the other hand, there are startups who are doing these very vast $1 million rounds, and even those startups generally you keep hearing are crashing out of the system, and they are focusing more on the blings of the market and having nice fancy offices and this and that, and forgetting that the core exists. So somewhere along the line, you have to be very well grounded as an entrepreneur. If you believe you're going to be an entrepreneur who's going to sit in office while some other person is going to do the dirty work, you're wrong. I was knee deep in BS when I was doing the waste energy. When I was doing solar, I was not an engineer. My engineers were installing, but I stood there on the rooftop, almost slept there just to understand what the problems are. Today, I do the sales pitch. Today, I'm sitting in my workshop till 8 and 9 with my engineers. So you have to be there on the ground. You're a CEO, you're a COO, you're the chief HR officer, you're the chief person who solves the problem when water is not coming in your office as well. So you have to put in multiple hats when you're an entrepreneur. I can go on and on about this,
The
but
challenge is,
yeah.
so imagine you're not an entrepreneur. Imagine you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So how would your journey have been different? Would you have been able to do what you're doing if you were part of an organization and you were building sustainability or climate action or climate change from within the organization?
So I think as an entrepreneur, there's a nice support underneath. If you're an entrepreneur, you're earning a salary. Let's be honest, right? uh, but I started as an entrepreneur. That waste to energy thing I did. I founded that project. I was developing that project,
Right.
and that gave me the confidence to, at the end, maybe, and now that I think about it, become an entrepreneur later in life. So being an entrepreneur is nice, as if your organization gives you the leverage and flexibility and the free to kind of run with a project. Nothing like it. And count your blessings that your organization is telling you to be an entrepreneur, where you don't have to worry about if there's some money coming in at the end of the month. So use that opportunity to work like an entrepreneur, and then step out, become an entrepreneur where you have to, really make it out there. So yeah,
Get into BS.
get
Real
yes, real real BS.
Is there any other questions? Those are good questions and comments. Any? Go ahead.
That there were many obstacles in your way since you have
Hmm.
started the project. So how did you reframe or reimagine your whole journey, and where was the motivation coming from?
So the question is on how did we reframe and reimagine the key word is pivot. PIVOT वो आपने करना होता है. If you're like, and it's very hard to, at some point as an entrepreneur, while you need to know about what works, you also need to know what is the right time to exit, right? And exiting is so hard. I'll tell you, the shop we made, it was like a sunk cost, but I kept for 4, 5, 6 more months. You're like, itna kharcha kar liya hai, isko karne dete hain. Because, and that was probably not the right decision, right? It just organically happens that at some point you have to let go and think about other ways to survive, or maybe take your direction towards. There's no like black and white answer to that. You will just know at some point you will just run out of money and you'll be forced to do it, right? This is not working. But letting go is hard, and knowing what is the right time to exit is also hard. There is a concept called sunk cost, that my future decisions should not be dependent on the cost that I've incurred and they've already incurred. I'm not getting that. Like the shop I invested in. I invested in a shop pre-COVID. Post-COVID, the world changed. The world changed to e-commerce. I was just hanging on to that shop just because I made millions of, it was a nice, shiny thing. And I tried very hard. Maybe it's going to happen. It didn't happen. The world had changed. People didn't want to go into retail outlets, let alone in a retail outlet. There was a very new concept of displaying energy efficiency. So I had to let go of that concept and then think about how do we move on. This machine, by the way, that I made right now was supposed to be one element of my shop. My idea was sustainability retail, the retailing of sustainability. So my idea was there's going to be an e-commerce marketplace. I have a physical shop, and this physical shop is going to be a zero waste shop where people can come in, refill their almonds and coconut oil and this, and there'll be a shampoo machine. This was just one part of the shop. Turns out this was actually the main thing, has turned out to be a main thing. So you have to realize within the entire envelope of solutions, some things come up as real diamonds for you to back. So yeah.
Nice. This is a
So
Mohsin
Mohsin has a comment. Mohsin saying electric vehicles are not a mitigation at all. And what about the electricity still produced? Wait, all the electricity still
Not a
produced.
mitigation.
Yeah. So he's saying all the electricity still produced is
Yes,
by fossil
that's
fuels.
a good
and even
point.
Solar cells, manufacturing of those is harmful for environment.
So if you're not, so the idea behind EVs is, sure, it's a fair point that if you're not really changing the way you produce your electricity, which is based on fossil fuels, then there's really no point going to EVs. But the idea behind that even solar has emissions, everything has emissions. Even any cleanest activity, आप दरख्त लगाने जाएंगे तो आप गाड़ी पे जाएंगे तो मैं बोलूंगा ये तो गाड़ी आपने की है तो आप दरख्त भी ना लगाएं. The how you get out of this quagmire is, the idea is to do life cycle emissions analysis from manufacturing to installation to production to its disposal. अगर उसके net zero emissions या positive नहीं है, so that technology is clean. So even while solar might have emissions in post-consumption या उसकी manufacturing, the fact that during its lifetime, it's able to substitute fossil fuels, it has higher positive emissions. And EVs इसलिए हम जा रहे हैं क्योंकि अब renewables की वजह से renewables are being integrated into the grid. And every country has targets for 2030. Pakistan ka target है 60% renewable पे जाएंगे. So our grid is becoming cleaner. अब हम windmill से गाड़ी तो नहीं चला सकते ना पीछे windmill लगा के, लेकिन wind से हम बिजली बना सकते हैं और वो बिजली गाड़ी के अंदर जा सकती है. So point is, क्या हम उस वक्त तक का wait करें कि हमारा grid renewable हो जाए and then we go to EVs? No, we need to start doing EVs right now. And I think that's the more cleaner transition to think. As far as the power problem, there is the power, we don't have an energy problem, we have a power problem, and that's also very solvable.
Thank you.
Okay.
Medjack?
Like before, or when this conversation is starting, my question was going to be, how are people going to accept using clean energy or becoming, aware of the planet? But then, and would that be like a trickle down effect? If large organizations are going to do it, then it's going to come down eventually. Then you said that we're already doing it, and we're already on an individual level, we're already practicing these kind of things. So are people not aware and what do we do to actually make them aware and become champions of this kind of an act?
Sure. I think, as I said, why would people do it? I mean, that is one thing, right? I mean, doesn't mean that we are reusing our ice cream ke dabbe, so that just absolves us from doing other things. That's just one small thing. And you start measuring your own, just like organizations are supposed to measure their own emissions. As an individual, you measure your own emissions. सुबह उठने से लेके रात सोने तक जो चीजें आप इस्तेमाल कर रही हैं, जो टूथपेस्ट का ट्यूब इस्तेमाल करने से लेके गाड़ी से ऑफिस आना, ऑफिस की बिजली इस्तेमाल करना, try calculating your own individual emissions, and then you'll see that everything that you do has an, we don't mean that it needs to go to zero, it needs to go to net zero. So at the end of the day, if I say theoretically that your emissions are 24 kgs a day, so maybe I would say if you can plant 3-4 trees, or if you can plant 50 trees in a year, that saves 24 kgs a day. So you, while spending 24 kgs living your life, can actually reduce 24 kgs. You are net zero. The idea is going towards transitioning towards net zero. We're not saying completely plastic isn't going to go away or fossil fuel is going to go away. The target is net zero. At least first thing is this growth of emissions, try to curb that, and the rest is try to do things that capture carbon from the air, which are the green initiatives that you can do. And as far as how consumers will do it, just like the solar examples, something needs to be financially advantageous for somebody to do this. वो solar भी लगाएंगे, वो EVs भी खरीद लेंगे. कल को आपकी fossil fuel vehicle और electric vehicle में 1-2 लाख रुपए का अगर फर्क रहा, और आपको लेकिन पता चला कि उसमें जो आपकी फ्यूलेज माइलेज है वो 10 kilometers per liter आ रही है, यहाँ पे 24 kilometers per liter आ रही है, anybody can convert that in their head saying, I'm going to save a lot of money in fuel. So that will automatically convert into doing. And for those things that do not have a financial thing, वो overall culture से आती है. ये 2 bin और 3 bin को separate करने वाली कहानी है. It took Germany and UK 10 to 50 years for their societies to evolve to a place where they're now not reducing waste. It needs to start somewhere. The best thing is start with schools. Grade 7th, 8th students, when they're thinking about it, वो अपनी आदतें change करें. Our elder generation, they're, let's not waste time there, at least for consumer. Let's focus on the low-hanging fruits, the younger generation and the students. And as I said, Gen Zs are quick to adapt. उनकी psyche को समझें कि they will ditch anything for, they're not like held on to anything. नया ऐप ले आए, वो फौरन नया वाला ditch करके वो नई वाली चीज ले आएंगे. If you convince them that this is the right thing to do, it's impacting them, they will start doing it. There is one hand up, or is that
There
previous
is,
one?
yeah. So Mohsin has a comment, but before that, there is a question. So Naveen has a question too. It was wonderful to hear you respond over my last question. I would like to include that eliminating plastic in today's world seems to be impossible. Alternatives of plastics are there being supplied by people like you, but what about the awareness about products like yours throughout the globe, and especially Pakistan, which lacks awareness factors? So what would you say to maybe raise awareness or increase the awareness, and how will it work?
Again, it's a slow process. As I said, plastic is not going to go away. Neither do I imagine that it's going to go away. But some point you have to start transitioning. The word is transition, and start somewhere. For us as a business, I can't take on the whole of Pakistan. I'm a young startup. I mean, I have to start somewhere. If I can do it with the AKU hostel or IBA hostel or some other places to start with, that will be the point where, you know, in a few years, when if students over here are becoming doctors and they start doing over here, they're gonna start. You're gonna see that in 5 years, 6 years down the line, this has become a common thing.
Just to add to that, because this question about awareness and within the healthcare domain, we kind of like hear about, okay, we'll have an awareness campaign for XYZ. Could be heart disease, could be neurological disease, could be stroke. Mental awareness, mental health awareness, and so on and so forth. So awareness. I think awareness also leads to a lot of fatigue, right?
Yeah.
So how much awareness and can you possibly kind of keep, dishing out into the, and I'm not saying we should not, but I have a hard time kind of, even when we've got potential teams and startups and all and talk about awareness as their product, as a
Yeah.
process. It's like, yeah, I mean, awareness हम लोग सालों से try कर रहे हैं.
हाँ.
इतनी minor चीजें तो हम लोग awareness की level पे ला नहीं सकते लोगों की.
Yeah.
So behavior change. I think the point I'm trying to make here is that even as doctors, and when we're trying to talk to our patients, behavior change is one of the hardest things. And it's so interesting that it's not just patients. Some of the hardest people to actually convince to change their practices are healthcare practitioners themselves.
Yeah.
Why is that? And what is that about? And there's this fascinating stuff behind this as well as to why is it that the smartest or the most knowledgeable lot would be the hardest to convert.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that can go down a different tangent, and we'd love to have follow-up future discussions with you as well, because we are at the top of the hour as well, right? So we're done with a very interesting conversation. If you would like to give us like a, take home kind of a message for ecopreneurs,
Yeah.
or challenge activists, or climate activists. Climate
change activists. Pleasure to be invited and have this conversation, and the interest I've seen. I would say that this is the right time if you want to even make a lot of money, because there aren't people providing solutions right now, and we have a lot of problems. And now finally the winds of at least climate change, the fact that you're hearing about this, corporates now, I've been in the social impact sector, and I used to say in terms of CSR funds, last 2 decades were about education and health. किसी ने कोई चीज फंड करनी है तो चलो स्कूल के लिए कर देते हैं और हेल्थ के लिए कर देते हैं. Now everybody talks about I want to do something in sustainability, and I won't rely much on those funds. Those are just seasonal funds, and I won't encourage anybody to do greenwashing over here, but do actual projects. This is not going away. There's a whole field out there, from EVs to generation to power to plastics. Plastic की पूरी supply chain है. Upstream, downstream, midstream, energy, upstream, downstream, midstream, batteries, solar, you name it. There is so much inefficiency. When there is so much inefficiency, there is potential for saving. Where there's potential for saving, there is money and value. Where there's money and value, you have a business potential opportunity over there. So I would say if you want to do anything, start now. Actually, yeah, this is the right time.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Salman.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here online, and back to you.
Thank you. And we will see you next time with another guest. And we would like to have follow-up conversations with you, Salman. So it was a very interesting discussion.
You can connect with me on LinkedIn because I'm very active over there.
Okay, great. Good to know that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.